What's a movie you love but critics seem to hate? Megamind. It doesn't have too many negative reviews, but most critics called it unoriginal and were always comparing it to Despicable Me. This movie was actually a lot better than critics gave it credit for. It had very well-written complex characters and the themes it explored were inspiring and fascinating. It's a movie that just came out at the wrong timing. One might call it a subversive masterpiece. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Ben Stiller. I genuinely connected with that film and found it both uplifting and humbling at the same time. I should also mention, I saw this movie by chance as part of a random early screening. My wife wanted to walk out 10 minutes in, but I convinced her to stay. Curious as to where the film was heading. She still hasn't forgiven me for it entirely lol. Wait, people didn't like that? I loved it. Treasure Planet. I absolutely love this movie. I have it on disc and have it for my PS2. Whenever I read reviews about it, people always say that it was a flop and had no potential for success. I thought the concept was pretty cool. I mean, space pirates? What kind of kid wouldn't love that? I read the book and loved it too. The only bad part would probably be Ben. But the soundtracks are amazing. TP will always have a place in my heart. Treasure Planet and Atlantis are some of my favorite Disney movies. Hooked to this day, I never use Rotten Tomatoes because of how low they scored this masterpiece. Oh man, I love Hook. I love the visuals. I love the themes. I love the lessons. I love the sets. I love the establishing shot of Neverland, with the compass rose as a physical feature in the ocean. I love the establishing shot of Hook's ship, which looks like a skull with Hook and Smee's silhouettes representing ice. I love the Lost Boys treehouse. I wanted to live in that so badly as a child. It's not a perfect movie, but all the things I love really block out the things I didn't like. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Just watched it there less than a week ago and loved everything about it. Sadly, the critics did not agree with me. Venom. Venom had a lot of trouble working out what it wanted to be IMHO. It started off with this darker sci-fi, body horror vibe. And then you suddenly had Tom Hardy running around eating raw lobsters and stuff. Once it settled on the comedy, light-hearted tone, it worked well. But I can see what the muddled first act confused a lot of critics. Movies don't need to be just one thing, and that's something that critics can't wrap their heads around. I was reading an article about Practical Magic that said the same thing. I've heard the same thing about Mad Max Fury Road. All those movies are fantastic because they're not confining themselves for no reason. The Emperor's New Groove. Talk about missing the forest for the trees. F me up with some National Treasure. Fam. Also, I have a guilty pleasure for apocalyptic movies like 2012 and Day After Tomorrow. The critics in Rotten Tomatoes are wrong. Starship Troopers. I know it has nothing in common with the books, but it's a great cheesy sci-fi film as you're all also. Add Iron Sky, A Knight's Tale, and good lord, the cast of that movie is amazing as well. It's called Atlantis. Hello? I have no clue why, but when Dread came out it had super low ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, which dissuaded me from seeing it in theaters. I've made up for that decision by buying it on Blu-ray and adding it to my list of one of the best action films I've ever seen. Dread is one of the best comic book movies ever made, and it's criminal that it failed at the box office. Meet the Robinsons, amazing in almost every sense. Anytime my friends ask me why I'm so clumsy, dropped something, I'll say asterisk, I have a big head and little arms, asterisk, Twister. Some of the lines still crack me up. I gotta go Julia, we got cows. Fun fact, among all critics, Twister scored a rotten 57% on RT. But among top critics, it scored a fresh 69%. A mediocre critic scores a movie on how well they liked it. A great critic understands that not every movie is aimed at them personally. Their reviews are based on how well it satisfies the audience it's intended for. Twister may not have been an artistic triumph with great insights into the human condition. It was a fantastic movie about people getting tossed about by tornadoes. If you liked the poster, you loved the movie. It also featured some sweet Dodge motor vehicles. The Dodge Caravan will always be the vehicle of choice for evil meteorologists. Kung Pao enter the fist. The Boondock Saints, a pair of Irish twins, think they're on a holy mission to rid Boston of the Mafia. What's not to love? There are people who don't love this movie, and my feelings towards humanity were pretty low already. I think it's like an internet inside joke that people pretend to like this movie. I think it works as a parody, but people make it sound better than it is. Tron Legacy. I watched it as a kid and loved the shit out of it. It's what got me into computers and whatnot. I watched it last night and the visuals paired with Daft Punk's stellar soundtrack makes it my favorite movie ever. Still my favorite soundtrack of any film to date. Pokémon, the first movie. I feel like anyone who isn't already a Pokémon fan is unqualified to determine the quality of that film. Monsieur. Practical Magic. Such a genuine, sweet, beautiful movie that had such a huge impact on me as a kid. But critics hated it. Grown-ups. I genuinely enjoyed it. Adam Sandler gets too much hate in my opinion. I haven't seen most of his movies, but Click genuinely made me cry. It started out as a dumb comedy and got super real. Also his new movie, Uncut Gems, was probably his best performance. Yup, so unwarranted. I grew up on these movies. I love these movies. Just look at their Rotten Tomato critic score. It's fucked. Longest Yard, 31%. Happy Gilmore, 61%. Big Daddy, 39%. Billy Madison, 40%. 50 First Dates, 45%. The Waterboy, 35%. Ebert hated Empire Records. One of the things he complained about was the cliché plot. It's a hangout movie, it's not at all about the plot. Empire Records is legendary. Bright. I'm a sucker for sci-fi, fantasy. Same. But I kinda agree with the criticism, lol. They literally just made orcs black people. Nothing wrong with trying to illustrate racism in fiction, but they kinda miss some important details. People didn't hate orcs because of their skin, but because of some arbitrary point in history that they made up 1000s of years ago or whatever. Then they made the orcs stereotypical black Americans despite not having anything in world pushing them to be that. It's like if people today just hated all Roman people because they conquered a ton of Europe 2000 years ago. 1000 years is a long time to hold a grudge, and it really makes no sense that orcs would be hated that long for it. I'm not gonna lie, I was hyped for Bright. I liked the setting, even though it was lazily world built. The tone and effects. It just kinda sucked at the end when I just sat there and thought about it for a few minutes that it all just falls apart. The Star Wars prequels. I'm not a Star Wars fan at all. I've seen each movie once, maybe twice, so I'm not the kind of person who has in-depth debates about the lore or whatever, but is such a person with a less close personal viewpoint. I liked the prequels the very best. I just enjoyed the politics a bit more than the other movies. I really enjoyed the arc of Anakin Skywalker and watching him fall from the chosen hero to what he ultimately became. And I thought Obi-Wan Kenobi is the best character in the entire series. Watching the confrontation between him and Anakin was gut-wrenching and emotional. And like I said, I generally don't give much of a shit about Star Wars. Every Star Wars prequel has more positive than negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. The Greatest Showman. I love it. Audiences loved it, critics hated it. I liked it too, but I started to like it less when people pointed out the actual events. I think the movie was still good, but I can see why people wouldn't agree with praising Barnum as a saint when he really wasn't. I still listen to Never Enough though. I got chills in the theater watching that. The film is really good, but it's based on a historical character. The big problem is that they glorify him to the point of making him the hero when really he was a douche. Waterworld. Dennis Hopper was hilarious in this. I love this movie. I can't explain why. I think maybe due to growing up in 90s. Same. I love this movie unironically. No critic will ever convince me it is bad. Tommy Boy. I don't care what critics say. That movie is hilarious. Critics don't like Tommy Boy, I guess. It only has 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. Hitchhiker's Guide. The Life Aquatic got pretty lukewarm reviews. I thought it was brilliant. Brilliant movie. And one of my favorites. The fact that my own father was a bearded oceanographer with whom I sometimes had difficulty connecting emotionally is entirely a coincidence. Sucker Punch. I enjoyed the movie enough, but my god, I love the soundtrack. God, I love Sucker Punch. There's not one thing I do not love about it, and I do not consider myself a Snyder fan, so all my friends are shocked that I love that movie. I think a movie with themes of sexual abuse and mistreatment of patients in an asylum has to take itself seriously to some degree. But the seriousness of the backdrop against the absurdity of her dance fantasies lost a lot of people. But for me, the sheer unabashed escapism of it just really swept me off my feet. I also like the twist that Sweet Pea is the person who makes it out. The person who's telling the story. Like your main character and your protagonist aren't the same person. Hocus Pocus. Do I need to say anything? Sistars. The Warcraft movie. I know it's flawed a lot, but I was such a huge fan of the Azeroth universe then. And still am, so it was so enjoyable to see it in a movie. Little Nicky. It's supposed to just be stupid fun. Yo, I loved that movie. Gonna watch it again. Lucky number 11. This movie has an absolutely killer cast, and honestly the ending was amazing in my opinion. Josh Hartnett is a great actor. Probably gonna get hate for this, but Suicide Squad. It actually started really well emo. The second half kinda went downhill though. Me too. Great acting, music and sets, but oy vey, that Enchantress storyline sucked. Team America. World Police. MacGruber. Hot Rod. Strange wilderness comedies just don't get the respect they deserve for being hilarious, even if the plot is nothing special. Hot Rod is pure genius. Joe Dirt. The Hobbit trilogy. I hear a ton of complaints about how it turned a more lighthearted story into something more dark and sinister for the films. I think that was a good choice considering we know what The Hobbit moves into. As far as complaints about CGI, if Peter Jackson had that level of technology for LOTR, he would have used it. Standalone, I think they're great. If you put them next to LOTR, they're trash. But basically any trilogy except the original Star Wars is trash next to LOTR. I disagree that Peter Jackson would have used that level of CGI. The reason he did 3 movies and that they weren't up to par was because he took over for Guillermo del Toro and had about a quarter of the time to develop his vision as he had wanted. The studios also demanded 3 movies from a tiny-ass book because money. He used tons of CGI because he was rushed. It's really a shame that he wasn't at the helm from the beginning. The core. It's terrible. It's fun. I love it. I have rewatched the movie so many times on Netflix. I'm honestly surprised that the company hasn't sent me an email asking if I'm okay. But I love that movie. It's a great guilty pleasure. From a long time ago when Keanu Reeves was considered a bad actor. I really like Johnny Mnemonic. It is considered a hell of a movie. But I liked the setup, soundtrack and the old school mid-90s SFX that were all over the place. Hudson Hawk. Da Vinci Code. Batman v Superman. The Ultimate Cut answers so many missing links than the cinematic version. I loved the dark tone interpretation they took with the movie. It's a shame they didn't keep the dark tone with Justice League. You and me both. Love Marvel for being bright and fun, but love DC because it is darker by nature. Even their comics are a little darker in tone. should have kept it that way with their movies and carved their own niche in the market. Napoleon Dynamite. Critics and MCU fans, Amazing Spider-Man 2. I was about to post this but I guess you beat me to it. I really love those movies because of the action, soundtrack and romance, but not even my family agrees with me. Forget critics. I don't mind though because I love those movies. I am sad they're gone but it's whatever. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.